press conference is basically when multiple forms of media get together to interview someone who's newsworthy or someone, I guess, who we want to find out something about. In football terms, that may be a player, it may be a coach from a team, it may be someone who's in the news, an administrator or something along those lines. Being prepared is pretty important. It's really good to know some background on your subject. If it's a player, how many goals have they scored this season, how well have they been playing, how old they are, previous clubs. Perhaps they're coming up against a club that they've played for before. These are things that are very important to know before the press conference starts because they give you ammunition for the questions that you want to ask. In Australia, again, we tend to be a little more informal with these sort of things. Normally, we know roughly who the media outlets are and the questions are just asked directly to the talent. There's not usually an order to these sort of things. They often take care of themselves. There's usually the talent answers one question, the question finishes, there's a little bit of a lull, someone else will ask another question. And often with a press conference, there's a natural flow to it. If the person being interviewed follows a certain topic, says something that needs expanding on, the next journalist or the same journalist will ask a question following on from that question. So it is very important to listen to what the talent is actually saying before you ask your next question. The absolute key in asking questions in a press conference is ask the questions that people want to know. It's pretty simple. What do you want to know about the person who's being interviewed? And usually what you want to know about the person being interviewed is what everyone else wants to know about the person being interviewed. That is very important. It's a great skill, and often it is actually overlooked by a lot of people, that what the public want to know about a person should be the top priority in your head when you are asking questions. The reality is you are trying to do a job. The person answering the questions is trying to do a job too, and it's always very important to maintain a level of professionalism. When it comes to other journalists, try not to ask questions over the top of other journalists. That's a little bit of a skill in itself, but most of the time if you do watch a press conference, you'll find it doesn't happen. The reason being because most of the journalists have been to a lot of press conferences and they know the right time to ask a question. There's usually a little bit of a lull in the conversation, a little bit of a lull in the answer, or the talent finishes their answer and then the person asks. So it's pretty important not to try and cut off other journalists or cut off the talent while they're asking questions. Ask with a clear voice. Make sure that you pronounce everything properly so there's no grey area, so the person that you're asking the question to understands what you're saying, understands the context of your question, and understands exactly what it is that you want to know. That's pretty important.
A player's role at a press conference is to answer the questions that are given to him properly, but also to be honest without being disrespectful to anyone.
A player's role at a press conference is to give a different aspect of the game and a little bit more of an insight into what the players are thinking.
A player should conduct themselves at a press conference by appearing well presented, being confident, answering questions proudly.
A player should conduct themselves at a press conference by respecting all parties that are present and trying to answer the questions as truthfully and accurate as possible.
A player should prepare for a press conference by knowing what the topics are about, preparing their personal questions, and making sure that they don't say anything negative.
The hardest thing about answering questions at a press conference would be the fact that you don't actually know the questions that are going to be fired at you. You have to think on the spot. You don't have much time to think on the spot. If there's a controversial question that you have to answer, possibly about your team, or I think finding the words to ensure that you don't give too much away in your answer is definitely one of the toughest things.
The hardest thing about answering questions in a press conference is probably when you get asked about something that you're not too keen to talk about, or something controversial that's happened in a match. It can be difficult because, especially if you're asked right after a match, you might be feeling something that you probably shouldn't really say. So you've got to sort of, portray the message that you want to talk about, not necessarily what the reporter or the person asking you the question wants to talk about, and that can be difficult sometimes.
You show respect to the media by answering the questions as truthfully and accurate as possible, and giving them a good insight of your environment at training, but also not giving anything away that is going to be detrimental to your team.
You show respect to the fans in a press conference by acknowledging them, showing them that you appreciate their support, not belittling the opposition's fans, just speaking positive, keeping things in good spirit, and trying not to bring a negative attitude towards fans and the big part that they play in our game.
You show respect to an opposition at a press conference by thanking them for their efforts on the day. Whether you win or lose, you still have to uphold yourself with integrity and fair play.